Hi, everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. It looks to be a holiday edition from the Christmas tree in the corner. Lovely, lovely sort of vibes going on here, as well as, there it is, as well as some holiday books there. The Violence being one of those. That's not a holiday book, I don't think.
Merry Kilmas.
Yes, yes. Delighted to be talking with author Delilah Dawson. Delilah, thank you for jumping in and joining me.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. I will start out by mentioning a laundry list of titles. You are a delightfully prolific person. Delightfully prolific. So I'll mention Rise of the Red Blade, which is right there over your shoulder.
Yeah.
Um, Mine, which is another of my favorites. The Violence, of course. You've also written in worlds like the Mirrorverse and Minecraft and Spider-Man and some shared universe in, let me make sure I get this title right, Tales of the Pale with Kevin Hearn.
Yeah, we write the Tales of Pell, which is kind of Terry Pratchett-esque fantasy trope humor.
Yes, yeah. And then I think the last thing that I'll mention is that, like many guests on the show, you create in the world of graphic novels,
Yep,
Sparrowhawk being one of those, as well as work in like Firefly.
yep.
Yeah. So lots of things, lots of things. I'm sure I left something out there that we can come back around to.
Yeah, I get bored very easily. It's kind of like that whole, if the shark stops swimming, it dies. Like I just don't stop.
Love it. I love it. Well, and it makes for great reading. It makes for a great ready-made supply of materials. And you've written for younger readers, but you're also currently writing for adults, which is a cool thing as well.
Yep, adult, middle grade, and young adult are kind of I've been all through all of those back and forth, just
Yeah.
jumping around, dodging non-competes, seeing what I have open.
Nice, nice. Well, the barriers between those areas are so permeable. Like as a middle school kid, I remember reading, adult content like Michael Crichton. He wasn't writing for middle school readers, but I was definitely into it at that point in
Oh
time.
yeah, Jurassic Park in middle school was pretty good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious about what's connected you to the world of authoring and how you knew that was the place for the shark to swim, if you will.
Well, for the longest time, I didn't. I grew up a visual artist, so I worked at a nonprofit art center. I went to art school. I have an art degree. You can see I've got like a painting back there behind me. That picture is
Hmm.
mine.
Oh, nice.
But I kind of never found my body of work, that thing I really, really loved and was very passionate about. I tried pretty much every medium there is. Uh, you know, every kind of painting, jewelry, metalwork, clay. I've kind of done it all. Did murals for a long time. Never really found it. And then once I started having kids, most art media are kind of poisonous to children and not things you want to
Right.
have around babies. So I didn't do any art for a long time. And then once my second kid stopped sleeping, I stopped sleeping and I started hallucinating. And I went to my husband and I was like, I'm hearing rats talking in the walls. Do you think that's a problem? And he was like, Yeah, it's a problem. You need sleep.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so he said, So you need a sleep schedule. We're going to get you more sleep, but you need a hobby because you normally have a creative outlet. And now you're not doing anything creative at all. And that's going to make you crazy.
Hmm.
And I was like, I can't do paint because it's poison. I can't do encaustic or pottery. And he's like, Well, just write a book. You have a laptop. You have a little, side table. Just sit at the couch with the baby in your lap and write a book. And my brain was so broken. And instead of being like, Oh, I don't know how, I'm not an author, I was just like, Yeah, fine, I'll do it. Whatever. Just help.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, and then I told him, and he'd written several books over the years that I had edited for him. So I'd edited plenty of books, and I'd seen them be written. But I said, well, I don't know how to get an idea. And he was like, what do you mean? You just have an idea, just like for paintings? And I was like, no, it's not like paintings. Like an idea for a painting is that flower, which doesn't write a book. So he was going to send me a story prompt every day until something hit. And the first one he sent was a woman wins a cruise and hijinks ensue. And I was like, well, I can't write that. I've never been on a cruise. And he was like, oh my God, like you're creative. Figure it out. You're going to have a note for everything. So I was like, well, I've been on a ferry. So I wrote my first book, which is about a woman who went on a ferry and accidentally slept with Zeus because that's what Zeus does. And then she started seeing mythological creatures everywhere. It was a really bad book. The first sentence was about diarrhea. It got 57 rejections. But I guess once you realize you can write a book, and once you've written one book, you're like, oh, I can keep doing this over and over again.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I finally kind of found that abiding passion and that that flow state I wanted to be in every day. And it was so satisfying after kind of like, 30 years as a visual artist, never really getting that kind of satisfaction out of art to finally find it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you said a couple of things there in particular that I love. The support of a partner being one of those, but also just writing as like therapy and writing as a creative outlet and expression and exploring experiences. So love that. Yeah. So I'm curious about what inspires your creativity, um, like the kind of stories that you're particularly drawn to. Because I imagine that if you gave the prompt, a woman wins a cruise, a lot of people would not take it to Zeus and the things that Zeus does. So I'm curious about that and how you're drawn to kind of the mythological, the dark, and things of that nature.
Yeah, all of my work seems to be on the spectrum between whimsical and dark.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
that's my jam, is that little spectrum there, which we found out when my first book series came out. My editor was like, "We need to work on your brand," and I was like, "No, my next book has nothing to do with this steampunk vampire romance series. It's the next book." And they kept trying to nail me down, and I was like, "It's never gonna work. I'm just gonna write everything I want to, and you're gonna have to figure it out. I'm so sorry."
Love it, love it.
So I kind of always knew, but it's like that book, I guess it went straight to Zeus because I'm always thinking of more fantastical things versus contemporary things. And so when you think of I am on a ferry in Greece, Greek mythology is the first thing that comes to mind. Like I was the kid that had that Delaire's book all the time.
Hmm.
The second book I wrote was about rats in the walls that were talking. So it was kind of inspired by what I was hallucinating at the time.
Hmm.
So it was
Hmm.
kind of like the borrowers, the littles slash, a dark kind of horror tale for middle grade kids. So that one did not get it got my agent, but it didn't sell. So like it went to the table twice, it never sold. And then my third book was Wicked as They Come, the first book in my Blood series, and it came from I was binge watching Buffy, and
Ah.
I had one night, once I started getting back into the sleep thing, if you haven't gotten enough sleep for a while, your dreams are crazy. And so I went to sleep watching Buffy and had this dream where this guy was talking to me, and he talked just like Spike, but he kind of looked like Jonathan Rhys Meyers in a top hat, and he was in this, forest full of birches, and I was sitting on a stone altar, and I was like, oh, I've got to hang out with this guy more. And so I wrote that book. So they're all whimsical, dark things based on whatever I encounter. Sermons of the Storm came from a photo set I saw of Six Flags New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, and
Oh
the
wow.
violence came from being on a panel at Emerald City Comic Con talking about violence against women and thinking if only there were a way that women could violently fight back and not be held responsible for it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'll also mention The Rise of the Red Blade again over your shoulder. I pick up so many Star Wars books and shared universe content, and I'll read a little bit of it. I'll be like, okay, and then I'll put it down. But that's probably the best take that I've read, or the most engaging take that I've read on a Star Wars universe kind of story in maybe 20, 25 years, something
Oh,
like
dang.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious about that working in other people's sandboxes kind of thing versus working in your own worlds.
Writing IP or intellectual property is a very specific skill set. Um,
Hmm.
it's not about who knows the property best or who can name every character or who loves it the most. It's about who can write in the voice of that world and knock out 120,000 words in 45 days, which is very specific.
Hmm.
So my I knew I wanted to write IP pretty early on, just because I'm a big nerd and I've always been into all of this. So my first chance was for Kindle Worlds when they came out. I got to write a story. I guess it was a novelette in the world of Shadow Man, the comic.
Hmm.
That was my first thing. I kind of had to work up to some bigger IP. My first Star Wars story was a novella based on The Force Awakens, where we had no information about it at all. I had one photograph from the magazine spread for the Annie Leibovitz photos, and they're like, "That's all you get." And I was like, well, "Okay, you guys going to send me like the World Bible? Are you going to tell me which of my RPG books I can use, like which of my maps work?" And they were like, "None of it. Make it all up." Because as we know, we kind of lost Legends and we rebooted everything. So that was
Hmm.
stunning when it was suddenly like I was trying to ask them which of these planets I could use, and they said make up a planet, and I was like, "You're trusting me to make up a planet? Like you're giving me the artifacts of a god here? Are you sure you want to do that?" But I really love it. Star Wars especially means a lot to me, and I put a lot of what I'm kind of going through at any given time, I guess, into my work. So when I was writing Rise of the Red Blade, uh, we've kind of been on a journey as a family for the last while and discovering ADHD and then autism in all of us. And so it's definitely a book about what it's like growing up feeling very different from everyone and not feeling like you're accepted or that your specific and creative way of interacting with the world is accepted by the people around you and by your mentors, and how that kind of turns that it takes a village into, well, I think I'm going to fight the village now because y'all hurt me.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's definitely how I felt growing up, and how I saw trying to help my children navigate public school right now, how kids are treated when they do not fit into a very neat puzzle piece hole. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, well said. Very well said. As an educator, very well said. Yeah. Yeah. So little question to tuck in here. How do you, what is the secret for writing 120,000 words in 45 days? Is that
I mean,
coffee? Is that green
oh,
tea? What
I
is
don't do caffeine unless I'm,
it?
if I have to give a speech, I'll have a cup of coffee, and then I'm like, but in general, I'm a no caffeine person.
Hmm.
No, I mean it's like I'm an Olympic lifter, and you have to start out lifting very light, and then you build up to it, and you build up to it. So I think that if you start writing and you develop, I'm not a person that says you have to do this to be a writer. Writers write every day. If you don't write every day, you're a bad person.
Right,
But for
right.
me, I have to do something writing related every day, or I definitely feel a loss in my life. I tend to, when I'm first drafting, aim for about 2,500 to 3,000 words a day, which is about one chapter. So
Hmm.
I'll, write the chapter, start the new chapter, write the first couple of sentences so I know where to start, and then kind of think about it the whole next day, uh, and all night. And then the next day when I sit down to write, I've already got the chapter started. I know exactly what I'm going to do, and I get writing. Um, so yeah, I write very fast naturally. I usually write a book in anywhere from 2 or 3 weeks to usually about a month, month and a half, depending on if anything kind of gets in the way.
Hmm.
Um, but I was also that way from the start. My first couple of books I wrote just as fast. But I think the big key is writing that fast, and it has to be, I don't want to say good in that that's a value judgment, but it has to be like publishable
Uh-huh.
pretty
Hmm.
fast. And then also for IP, you have to have a very thick skin and be easy to work with, because you're going to get a lot of notes back. The first time I got the draft of Phasma, my first Star Wars book back, it was
Hmm.
about 110,000 words. There were 17 people arguing in the comments, and it crashed Word
Oh, wow.
on my computer. And that's a lot if you're not ready for that. That's another reason why, it's usually more seasoned people end up with these bigger IP jobs, because like you go through the stages of grief when you get an edit letter like that. And it's usually like, we loved it, we loved it. Here's 18 pages of notes. We loved it, we loved it. We can't wait to see what you come up with. And then they're going, oh God, I already thought it was the best I could make it. Now I have to do more.
Right, right. Well, there's so much, there's that whole world that people get into, they argue about. I mean, among the fans, but that also sort of reveals a little bit about the editing side as well of people that are channeling the story in the direction that it needs to go in.
Well, it's often more things, which I've learned, say in Star Wars, every writer has their strong points in the Star Wars world and their less strong points, which is why you would go to Alexander Freed for a very specific naval battle, and you would go to me for, Mad Max in Star Wars space with like, it makes smoke. I don't know how. I'm not the hardcore science person. I'm not the diplomacy person like Claudia Gray. I'm the violent women person.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I, in that first book in Phasma, I would try to guess which kind of ship and where it would be. And then they would be arguing story group, because like, oh, well, the quad drive yards were closed for those years. They would have had to import it. But at that point in time, the Empire had impounded all of these. So now I just say like, brackets, please put ship. And they'll be like, oh, it's an Imperator number 7. And I'm like, cool, thank you. Its
Ah.
name is George.
I love that. I love that.
It saves us
And,
all time.
yeah, and collaborating with the wider world of it. Um, so I am of course curious about what is on the horizon creatively that you can talk about. It sounds like you're one of those people that are you a one project person at a time and then it's the next thing? Like, multiple things at the same time
Well, I
creatively?
can only first draft one thing at a time. I think a
Mm.
first draft's like carrying laundry from, the dryer to the couch where you're just holding everything in your arms and you don't want to drop anything. So if you drop a sock and you reach for the sock, a pair of pants is going to fall down and then you're just going to fall down the stairs.
Mhm,
So I
mhm.
only carry, one load at a time. Um, but once you are kind of a career author, there's always stuff coming in where you're having to look at book cover copy or talk about the title or look at this. There's always something happening. But in general, it's first drafting one thing at a time, sending it off, and then editing whatever comes next, and just looking at the. I have ADHD. I have to keep a to-do list of things that have to be done and the dates they have to be done by, so I can cross them off. Or otherwise, I'll have every now and then, especially if something gets away from me, I'll be like, "Oh, that's due today. Okay, well,
Right,
good
right.
luck finding dinner, everybody, because I'll be in my office till 2 in the morning and
Mhm.
getting it done."
Yeah, yeah. I'm noting that I started out by saying I was going to name a laundry list of titles, and you just like extended the metaphor. Just gonna note that right there. Love it.
Laundry, yeah.
Yeah.
But as for what I've got coming up, let's see here. I do have a couple secret projects that I can't
Mhm,
talk about,
mhm.
but we've announced the title of my next book that's out next year, my kind of next big adult book from Del Rey, that was the second book in the violence contract, which is called It'll Only Hurt for a Moment. It's a feminist horror set in a North Georgia writer's retreat slash asylum. Let's see, I've also got, I sold a novella this year, or I had a novella come out this year called Bloom,
Mhm,
that is
mhm.
a kind of girl Hannibal, and that's through Titan. So they bought a second horror novella that's called Guillotine. So that one should be out
Nice.
too. Um, I have a third middle grade horror that I thought would be out this year, but it's going to be out next year. We're still talking about the title, but the book is written and edited. We never really know how that's going to happen. And then I've got a couple of IP things that haven't been announced yet. So there's always stuff in the pipeline. Oh, and we just announced I sold a witchy mountain romance that will be out in 2025. It's called Books and Bewitchment.
Love it. Love it.
Romantasy rules right now, so I'll hop on that bandwagon.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I love my Witchy Mountains as well. Love the Witchy Mountains.
Yeah, that's why I went to Malaprops and it was like, can you guys show me how to run a bookstore? Because if I get this wrong and booksellers are mad at me, I'll never leave my room again.
Oh
It's
yeah,
so
yeah.
nice. Malaprops is just the best bookstore and the best people.
They seem on it and really awesome, and just a great sort of bookstore tucked away in the mountains
It
sort of
really
place.
is.
Yeah.
Asheville is such a cool city.
Yeah, we'll put malaprops. We'll put like their web link up here
Yeah.
somewhere. Um, but speaking of that, web links, spaces where people can connect with what you're doing to follow along with the projects, the threads, are there social media spaces that you find most generative or websites or things like that?
Do you mean places that I use or do you mean
Hmm.
places to find? Oh, places I use. I mean, I used to be all about Twitter, but now I've
I
given up,
know.
and it's really sad. It makes me so
Same.
sad. So I guess,
Yeah.
Instagram is a place where I found inspiration that has sparked several books. If you follow kind of weird photography things and artists, wonderful kind of inspiration seeds pop up.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I'm like most people, we you end up on, Google and Wikipedia all the time for book stuff. Star Wars, I just have, every Star Wars, you know, like encyclopedia and character and list of things. Like we've got, the ones that you unfold and it shows you what the ship looks like as if it's a diagram. Got tons of those. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't, it depends on the book, what you're looking for and what you need to find. But I really love experiential um, research. So like if I'm going to write about a bookseller, I went to a bookstore and spent 2 days there shadowing the different people to learn how to run a bookstore. And when I want to have characters riding a camel, I didn't know what it felt like to ride a camel. So I figured out how to go ride a camel. And when I had characters on a trapeze, I wanted to be able to write about that accurately. So I took a trapeze class.
Oh
So yeah,
wow. Love it.
anytime I can, kind of add more, I have synesthesia, all of my little, uh, you know, like I numbers and letters have colors for me. Scent gets tangled up in there. So
Hmm.
having the senses be really clear is very important to me. Like I don't like when things are done wrong in a book. I mean, I read a romance book once where people were making out on a bale of hay, and I was like, you can't make out bare-butted on a bale of hay. Like, you have
Nah.
lost my faith.
That's problems later. That is problems later.
It's
Yeah.
problems now. Oh my God, hay's the worst.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Very true. And finally, spaces where people can connect with you, spaces where people can kind of follow along and see what you're creating and see what's next on the horizon.
Yeah, so my website is always delilahsdawson.com. That also has some writers' resources that helped me get published. And there's a very poorly kept blog, but if you're an aspiring writer, you might find some things in there that help you. I am on Instagram and Blue Sky at Delilah S. Dawson. Any new social media that we think might be the next Twitter, the next thing, I'm usually on
Hmm.
there, and I try to grab at Delilah S. Dawson pretty quick.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I guess Instagram and Blue Sky are the main places where I am right now. And if you talk to me, I will talk back. If it's in good faith. If you're going to be mean to me about Star Wars, I'll block you. But in general,
Right,
I'm
right.
very nice.
As long as people are kind, it's a good
Yeah,
thing.
no, God, so many people help me up in the Twitter days to get published and learn more about publishing. So we always want to pay it forward and help any writer with an ungoogleable question.
Yeah, yeah, love it. So, author, researcher, it sounds like from the amount of time that you put into your
Not a
books.
researcher. I'm an experiencer, an adventurer.
Oh, I love that.
Like a
Trapeze
researcher is
artist?
like my friend Deanna Rayburn does such extensive, beautiful research for historical fiction. Then my research is reading Deanna Rayburn. I'm not
Nice.
definitely not the researcher. I'm the camel writer.
Nice, nice. Trapeze artist, can we say that?
I mean, I've taken 3 classes, so I guess you.
Well, thanks for all of the things that you're doing creatively for younger readers, for older readers, and for those that are somewhere in between, and for the younger readers, reading the older reader stuff is what I'll
Yep, that
say
was
there
me
as
reading
well.
Stephen King at 10 and being forever changed.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Delilah, thank you again, and glad to talk with you anytime.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.